Relational aesthetics in contemporary interactive art. My name is Lark Spartin. I'm a digital media artist and media studies graduate from the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. And my co-author is John Desnoyers-Stewart, a digital media artist and PhD candidate from Simon Fraser University. And our research begins by defining relational aesthetics. So in 1998, art critic and curator Nicholas Bourriaud proposed relational aesthetics as an art form that took human relations as its subject to really confront the commoditization of our everyday relations and propose these new ways of living. And through these social interstices that he proposed, it really was exploiting our social interactions to bring awareness to them. But relational aesthetics was proposed 20 years ago when digital media wasn't integrated into our connection and our communication practices the same way that it is today. So I think that relational aesthetics is even more relevant now to reveal that relationality between technology and each other as our social interactions have become really commoditized. So relational aesthetics is in need of that revitalization. And that's where our definition of digital relationality comes in. So we build upon relational aesthetics while incorporating digital technology, where contemporary digital art takes relationality as its subject matter. And this is important because relational art can offer the contemporary digital space a way to directly engage with the technology to embrace those underlying social structures and reveal that. And in turn, digitally relational artwork inverts our typical use of technology to bring awareness to the way that it shapes us in our everyday use. So there have been a lot of critiques of relational aesthetics, most notably by art historian and critic Claire Bishop. And this piece on the screen is a relational artwork by Rukrit Tiravanija, where he cooks pad thai in a gallery. And Bourriaud views this piece as sort of exemplary of relational aesthetics, but at the same time, it brings forth a lot of criticisms that Bishop has. So she criticizes the open-endedness of many artworks and how they don't really look at the relationships they're producing, their disconnect from those broader contexts and publics. And what she says is a lack of antagonism in this sort of utopic nature. So Bishop really states that a democratic society is one in which those conflicts are sustained and not erased. And without that antagonism, there's only really this imposed consensus of authoritarian order. So instead of highlighting pieces that provide like-minded spaces for people to gather with no attention to those tensions outside of gallery walls, antagonism really stands in contrast to those utopian examples, and it embraces that controversy and discomfort as not only something to put up with, but something that's really essential for that democracy and that growth. So acknowledging that tension is really what puts it to use instead of neutralizing it. So through our research, we claim that these criticisms of lack of structure, lack of antagonism can be solved through digital relationality, while also highlighting Bourriaud's initial vision of those ways of living. So I want to begin our discussion of digitally relational artwork examples with interactive installation, and first with the work of Rafael Lozano-Hemmer. So a lot of his work reimagines ways in which we can use typically intrusive technology and deliberately misuse it to facilitate that relationality and bring new possibilities of social connection and make people aware of how they connect in everyday life. So this piece, A Modal Suspension, reimagines text message communication using beams of searchlights and establishes these as sort of communication links. So this brings text messaging, which is seen to be private and isolating, into something public and communal to bring awareness to our social relations and our habits surrounding this technology. And this piece is also exhibited in public, so it really overcomes that lack of antagonism that Bishop talks about in gallery spaces. So installation artist Nathaniel Stern states that interactive art disrupts our relational embodiment and attunes us to its potentials. And it reframes the body, it reframes movement, and in this way, it can provide the necessary structure needed for relational aesthetics. So like in that piece by Lozano Hemmer and further pieces I'll show you, it really transforms the technology used from this unobtrusive mediator to this instrument for reflection. So this piece is named Gestures. It's by me, and it uses a Connect to track human movement. This was exhibited in the UBC Okanagan FINA Gallery, and it provided an opportunity for participants to use their bodies as the context while they created the content of the work. So in this piece, participants were able to move their bodies in ways that you normally don't see in everyday life. And so when they were using the piece with other participants, there was some social discomfort that was observed. So aligning with Stern's observations, pieces like this can attune users to their bodies and reference that utopic aim that Bourriaud references, but at the same time, it's embracing this underlying notion of performativity and limitation that's folded into the technology and really embraces that antagonism with people performing publicly and hopes to really deconstruct those social relations as a result. Body Remixer is a VR installation by John Desnoyers-Stewart, and it contrasts the ordinary uses of VR by encouraging physical touch and reframing social realities. So Body Remixer first invites that antagonism by countering the normal lack of touch that we have in VR. So it's really unexpected for people to reach out and feel another person whose identity is unknown. And on top of this, it creates antagonism in the subsequent lack of touch that people experience in VR, because pieces like Body Remixer really reframe people's expectations about what VR could be. So it really calls people to reflect on why these so-called embodied mediums of VR lack that critical sense of touch. In addition, it creates antagonism through touch between strangers across different social norms. So usually when people are interacting with VR, their identity is hidden or blurred, and it causes them to become a little more extroverted. So reaching out and high-fiving strangers, touching strangers, and people who aren't experiencing that VR can see this behavior as really strange because they don't understand what that person is seeing. So again, that's countering these norms of VR, because in Body Remixer, people are seeing the people around them rather than some separate social reality. So usually we're all used to being in the same space, but pieces like Body Remixer introduce that antagonism because it reflects different social realities. Social media is also another realm that can be exploited to create relational art. And similar to those interactive installation pieces that I showed, it can be used to bring awareness to how our everyday use of technology really shapes us. The business models of a lot of social media platforms are directly relying on commodifying interpersonal relations. And the platforms themselves offer this level of social exclusion and discomfort. So digital relationality offers these platforms a way to return that antagonism and infuse some of that democracy. So some examples of this: on the left, you'll see Cindy Sherman posting these digitally manipulated portraits on Instagram to point to the constructedness of the platform. And on the right, Jenny Holzer delivers these ideas in public spaces through her projection work, which provides really like a universal call to question mediums themselves and open that discourse. So in pieces like this, by voicing what's normally repressed on social media, we make way to open for more conscious social exchange and infuse some of that democracy and that antagonism back into the platforms. Many social media platforms also have integrated AR, so augmented reality, through either filters that visibly transform a user's face, or they're a little bit more transparent, which really amplifies the superficiality of the way that AR is used today. So I think that AR is really an ideal topic for digital relationality because it's quite literally filtering how we view ourselves, how we view others, and our perceptions of this. So in response to this, I created a digital portrait series named Lark but Online. And the purpose of this project was to bring awareness to the way that we perform online, and it specifically exploits the selfie and manipulates my own image. And being presented in this sort of interface that's reminiscent of Instagram, it's bringing awareness to how we perform those personas online. The project also includes a AR filter portion, which is accessible through QR code. And these filters purposely distort the face to bring awareness to the contrived nature of the selfie. And facial and gestural movements that you normally see in the selfie, such as a smile, trigger animations within the filters. So that brings awareness to how we perform these out of context in our everyday use of AR. So design decisions like this can start to give recognition to how AR and mediums like this can affect our perception of ourselves and others. This project, Distant Distraction, Foul Breach, and Separate Sensation, is another project by me that was exhibited at the UBC Okanagan FINA Gallery. And this is a marker-based AR and video projection work that really makes a comment on how our disembodiment occurs on social media and how these social platforms really shape us. So in the AR layer, you can see animated hands as if reaching out for connection. And in the front layer, this textured mask filter covers the face, promoting ideas of being a lonely and disembodied spectator. So these filters are directly accessible through Instagram. And so by doing this, it invites you to reflect on how these platforms really shape our social relations and our everyday lives, and reflect on the problematic values that have come out of this. So in the augmented relational artworks that I've shown, it encourages individuals to interact with AR in a different way. So such as using it for a tool for creative expression, which helps understand the impact of AR that has in its normal use, which is that superficial connection and commodification. So the examples here that I've shown provide that structure that interactive installation does, but it also infuses this antagonism by remarking on the platforms used to view them. And this is similar to Christina Hook's idea of making strange. So shifting from those habitual movements that we can't really see them anymore into those non-habitual strange movements, which allows our digital relations not to be assimilated into everyday life. So the examples that I've shown today really show how we can use all these various types of media to infuse relationality and bring antagonism to a digital space that's really in need of that understanding from its users. So what I want to leave you guys with today is how we can use a theory like this to build a better future. So relational aesthetics was built on ideas that art should be integrated into everyday life. But I think what digital relationality is really trying to show is how can we encourage individuals to use these platforms differently than we do in everyday life? So the examples here give viewers a really active role in the interpretation and the production of relational art. And the most important thing I think to take away is that deliberate and purposeful use. And if we can use these platforms for their creative potential, instead, we can move from consumer to co-creator. For artists, I think embracing digital relationality really means viewing technology outside of strictly that productive context where we have that utilitarian user experience lens, and instead think about how we can create digitally relational artwork that embraces that discomfort and that antagonism and that discourse, because those are where those meaningful experiences really happen. So 3 recommendations for artists. I think the first is to think about how you can invert the technology that you use to propose a new way of viewing. The second is thinking about how you can use your participant to bring your artworks to life. And the third is blending that context and content. emphasizing those social outcomes of the piece, which directs the viewers to consider how the context, which is typically some technology, shapes them, their actions, and in turn, it gives them a really active role and understanding in how they can shape the technology through their actions. And through this, we can all combat those disembodying effects our technology has and focus on those social structures that it can promote. So through digital relationality, we can all bring awareness to the role that we have in shaping our technology and its role in shaping us, constructing a digitally relational future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. We have time for one question. Anyone on the floor? Maureen?
Hi, I'm just having a look at your paper, and as you said in your talk, and also in the paper, it says that these works encourage discourse, discomfort, and intersubjectivity. Is there a story or a vignette of how this has happened when people have been engaged with participating in your artworks?
Yeah, and my co-author John is here as well, and maybe he can speak a little more to this, but I noticed it especially in a lot of his work. So that body remixer work, encouraging people to use these platforms in different ways. So I think VR is a really good example. Using it in a way that encourages